Can I ask you a question?
The Bolton Ink Effect. So Louis just returned from South Africa and there was some interesting learnings, and we've decided to shift our schedule out a little bit and go back and explore some of the things that happened for Louis when he was in South Africa, because it very much fits in with the podcast that we had, our previous podcast, which was about being the sandwich generation. So without putting you on the spot, I just want to be clear about the fact that we haven't done any prep for this. This is really just, well, you haven't done any prep. I haven't given you much of an idea of what we're going to talk about, because I didn't want you to come with prepared answers, because life doesn't always give you the opportunity to prepare. So
hi, Bridge.
Hi, Louis.
How are you, my darling?
So like I said, you've just returned from South Africa, where you helped your parents through a rather challenging chapter for them, and it turned out to be quite a challenging chapter for you. So I wasn't there. You and Miss 14 went and did this adventure on your own. And it wasn't really only about logistics. There was some emotional elements that needed to be unpacked and addressed while you were there.
Yeah, I think just for context, before I answer that question, because I think it's very relevant what we're going to talk about, is that I have wanted to go back for a long time to go and see my parents and sort them out, because they are aging. My dad will be 85 in September this year, 2025, and my mom will be 83. The reason I haven't gone back is because I've been on a journey of immigration, and visa requirements didn't allow me in good conscience to go back to South Africa without jeopardizing what I had created here in New Zealand, building a new home for my family, for you and for Miss 14. So there have been hours and hours and hours of discussion between you and me about when I should go, how I should go, what I should do, all the complications and all the flippin' energy that I've poured into what ifs and not future pacing, but what the scenario might be. I had an idea, but there were lots of boxes that need to be checked, and there were lots of discussions that had to be had. And the agonizing conversations that you and I had time and time again, over coffee, over breakfast, over lunches, during your time at work, at night, it was exhausting. And a couple of months ago, after we got permanent residency, I spoke to you and I said, right, I'm going to do it. Purely because Miss 14 was going on holiday, and we booked the tickets. We took her out of school for the last week, and yeah, it was pretty much the time to kind of have the conversations that I needed to do with my parents. I had pre-prepped them a couple of weeks before. I had phoned them and said, this is what I would like you to do. This is what I would like to achieve. So there was an upfront questioning or requirement or request from both my parents to get stuff done. So that's just a little bit of context for for the listeners out there. And I was quite nervous, is the wrong word. I was looking forward to going back, but I didn't know what to expect, because I wasn't only going to go and spend time with my parents. I was going to go and spend time with some of my friends that I hadn't seen, you and my friends that we haven't seen for many, many years. So that all mixed in with a daddy-daughter trip to South Africa was exciting and extremely nerve-wracking at the same time. And hence your question.
Yeah, and so as you say, this isn't a Dear Diary. We're going to go and explore how difficult or how easy this was. The thing that stood out for me is how many comments we got on the on that last podcast. How many people it touched, and I think we touched so briefly on it, being one up and one down.
Yeah,
and there are so many other aspects, some that we're not even qualified to talk about, like the financial side of it, the legalities and all that sort of thing. But all of us are navigating, our age, are navigating a journey with our parents. Some of our parents are divorced. Some of our parents have met somebody else, and there are other complications with that.
Some parents have died.
Some parents have died. A partner has died, or one or both of the parents have died, and that in itself is very traumatic. Whether you're a Kiwi or whether you're a South African or an Indian or an American American,
Sure.
you've still, separated by vast hours.
Geographic distance.
Absolutely. And so the reason that I wanted to come back and visit that is because there is quite a bit to unpack. And so in my mind, I thought I wanted to tackle this in 4 ways. And the first thing is the reality check. So when we go, if you're local and you go home to your parents, whether it's for Father's Day or Mother's Day, or, if they live in a different region, or if you fly to South Africa or to another country to go and visit them, and it's been some time, there's a reality check.
Sure.
And so that for me is when you landed, what hit you the hardest? Was it something that hit you emotionally, or was it something that hit you practically?
The fatigue.
Other than the fatigue, because anybody who needs to travel.
Oh, Lord. Any time longer than 10 hours in a metal tube is long.
100%.
The first thing that hit me was the realization that this shit was going to get real. That I was actually in the country of my birth. And apart from navigating, landing at OR Tambo and all the people, and realizing we had to get mobile SIM cards that we could stay in contact, and organize getting to the car rental place to get the car, I suddenly realized I was in it now. Now it was time to operate. And I had my daughter there, which added a wonderful dimension, because I think she softened it in a way, because it wasn't just all about me. I had to look after her, but she didn't need looking after, if that makes any sense. So the overwhelming sense of shit's about to get real was the overwhelming feeling I had.
And what did you notice had changed? Okay, so let's define that. What did you notice had changed with your parents in the 6 or 7 years since you've seen them?
Okay, so my parents live about 20 minutes from the airport, and I haven't been back for 7 years. The first thing that hit me, based on all the conversations that I had had with other people who had gone subsequently back to South Africa, and the infrastructure and the traffic and blah, 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 was the age of the place. It looked older, it looked more tatty, it looked a bit more run down.
Okay. In terms of the emotional things, where did you land with that? Because you were with your parents for a week. So what had shifted there?
Bridge, I hear you talking to me now, and I'm trying to put this into the words as best I can, and words actually fail me. I'd done so much internal work on myself prior to going to South Africa.
Why did you need to do that?
To protect myself.
From what?
From being too emotional, too dramatic.
Do you have a tendency towards drama?
I do have. It's who I am.
Okay.
And anyone who knows me will tell you that. And
the drama.
And you laugh about it. But,
Yes, I
but
guess.
it's who I am.
Yeah,
and I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So I think I did a lot of prep work for myself, knowing that it had to be quite transactional.
So there were money roles that have shifted. You really had to take the lead in.
I never saw it as money roles changing. I saw it a change of, I needed to step up and be the parent, where I recognized that my parents are aging, and that was, in essence, also very difficult, because I remember arriving at where I stay, where I grew up, the house that I grew up in, and my dad walking down the driveway, and nothing had changed except he was
older, more bent,
7 years older, a
little bit more stooped,
a little bit thinner, a little bit more stooped. But it's like time stood still. And I can't explain it any other way, where 7 years of going through everything that you and I and Miss 14 have gone through, and yet here my dad was walking down the driveway, a little bit more potholed, the grass a little bit longer, the trees a bit bigger, the pigeon still eating the birdseed off the garage, off the floor. It was surreal.
So nothing physically, visually had changed, but
other than the age.
But over that week that you were with them, quite a lot had to be sorted for you. So there were a lot of dragons that you had to slay.
Had to hit the ground running. I didn't want to spend my entire holiday with them. So I had planned to stay with them for a week and a bit to sort out as much as I possibly could, with the main aim of finding out what the financial situation of my parents was. And I had to get to the bottom of a few details about what they wanted to do upon their death.
Okay.
So I needed to get the financial situation in order. And in South Africa, that required me to go and get power of attorney, bank power of attorney or financial power of attorney, plus general power of attorney, plus also find out exactly what investments, what the money situation was with both my parents. And I'm not going to go into that on this podcast, but needless to say, it was eye-opening and quite confronting. The part that was really kind of interesting was that I had to do this twice because my mom and dad are divorced but live together. And they don't want to share what each other have got or share the information. So I had to have two separate meetings, for lack of a word, or consultations with my parents. These are the people that gave birth to me. So it was fucking hard and not fun, but had to be done.
And I think your dad's, and I think we've alluded to this before, is of that generation where the financial side gets looked after by the man, and it's that very stoic kind of that generation of South African man who sits in control of it and who really manages it for everybody. And here you were insisting that a lot of that control be handed over to you because your dad has let some of the details slip. So it was only practically on your last day, if I recall, that you overheard by chance a phone call, and you discovered that in fact your parents' financial situation wasn't as dire as we'd initially thought, because there was a whole another side to it that he'd forgotten.
One of the biggest realizations that I had in opening up this conversation, and the fear I had, was that exactly what you're saying about my dad being that stoic kind of non-communicative person that he was growing up, was that it was the exact opposite, that he was now overwhelmed by any piece of information. So the information coming out of him was quite forthcoming.
So you were suddenly the adult in the room.
I was suddenly the adult in the room. The difference was that he didn't feel it necessary, or didn't even think, he actually didn't even think to say to me that he was meeting with his financial advisor while I was there.
But that was the whole point of you going to South Africa.
Correct. Because he didn't want to upset the investment advisor because they had a change of schedule. So I had to be the parent and phone them back and say, I'm here now.
Yeah.
Please, can we make it tomorrow, or whatever the case was, which was absolutely fine. Yeah. My dad was incapable of doing that.
Oh.
So that was a massive lesson for me to go, I'm going to have to lead this all the way.
Yeah.
And we did. Yeah. You know, we met and we discussed and we sorted out. And to the best of my ability, I've achieved 90% of what I've wanted to achieve.
So those practicalities were, you had to go to the bank with your dad. Correct. And get a bank power of attorney.
Yeah.
So you had to get your dad to agree to that, because that's never really been on the cards before.
He was like putty in my hands.
Okay.
There was no
resistance,
other than he had to remember where he'd actually put some stuff. So
that's right. Yeah.
And this is something I would love to tell other parents out there who have got older parents. It's like, find a space, or find a file, or a locker, or a suitcase, or a shelf that all the important documents are kept in.
Yeah.
Because what I realized was that the massive amount of change and the confrontation of talking about your demise cannot be easy. It wasn't easy for me, let alone being on the receiving end as a parent. They come from a generation where that was not spoken about. You didn't talk about things like your death. Life was a lot slower and a lot simpler. Let's just call it what it was. There wasn't the amount of information and the amount of stuff that happens today. One of the biggest problems that I have at the moment is that older generations, I'm talking boomers and later, that never kept up with technology, are frightened of it. And I didn't realize...
Some of them are frightened of it, yeah.
They are frightened of it. And I mean, and some of them, but the people, the folks that are are petrified of it because there's no education and people get left behind. They get letters in the post saying we are moving to email, we are moving to a digital. It doesn't even register for them because they don't know what that means. They don't even have internet at home. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, and it's not about laying fault or blame. But think about that for a second, Bridge, where you've lived your whole life because you've got a letter, a paper copy, which you can open and you can file and you can see and it's tangible and there's a telephone number that you can phone on a landline and speak to someone. Now all of a sudden you're getting an automated letter saying we're moving to email. And you haven't even been educated on that. You understand it, but maybe the technology that you've got is outdated because your computer needs to be updated.
Yeah, and if you don't have somebody close by that does that.
And then you've got to take that computer into a shop, drive into a shop. Yeah. The person behind the counter doesn't necessarily have
your best interest
at heart and charges you a fortune for something that you could have done quite simply. So I'm saying these hurdles need to be understood and need to be listened to, and then you have to find a different way of doing things. So what I had to do was connect my dad's email to me. So once every couple of weeks, I will go through his email. If anything important comes, I can then phone him on the landline because he doesn't have data on his phone because his data disappears. He doesn't know where it disappears to. Again, I didn't have enough time to kind of go through
educate him on
that.
So
all these little hurdles. All these little things which you and I take for granted, Miss 14 takes for granted, sometimes needs to be navigated and understood a little bit better. And I do have an issue with the system at large, that the elderly people are being left behind, Bridge. Yeah. Nobody, I'm not saying all of them, but it's really, really tough for me as well as a son.
Yeah, that is a challenge for them because they have to grasp a world
that's not their fault.
No, that we've
just moved on. Our generation, we said in a previous podcast, we've had a foot in pre-internet.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we managed to keep up as best we can, and some of us are better than others, but we understand and we get on with it. Yeah. So the change is quite easy. Indeed. But when you just step in their shoes lightly, it must be absolutely frightening.
Quite frightening for them. Yeah. So just to recap the practical steps there. So there's a bank power of attorney that is required specifically in South Africa. I'm not sure what the status of other countries or even here.
Yeah, and I don't profess to be an expert in any manner of field, but as I understand it, yes.
So there's a bank power of attorney, then there's a general power of attorney.
Correct.
Both of those fall away on the demise or...
Upon death, it falls away.
Yeah, on the demise of that person, or if they...
Mentally incapacitated.
That's the word I was looking for, thank you. The executor of the will needs to be sorted out.
So you need a will.
And your dad had to update his will because some of the stuff was left to a dead sibling.
Correct. So both my parents had to update their will. Unfortunately,
which they did
fairly
pushing.
A fairly quick process. It was a telephone call that I made, and they could do it, and they needed to sign, and that was all sorted. Yes, so as I understand it in South Africa, basically what happens is they have a will, and the will then appoints an executor, which is the bank because of the financial situation, right. And then they are executors of that will or the benefactors of
yes.
Which will be myself and my brother or my mom or dad, in either case, whatever the case is. Yeah.
So the executor is the bank, and so you went and you met the bank. In addition to which you met, and so what I wanted to say earlier on is that standing on the outside observing, it felt like there were so many different hurdles in terms of some of the financial decisions that your dad had made, which back in the day was popular. So there was unit trusts, and then there was getting shares there, and then there was this annuity there, and there was this thing there. So you had this massive basket of things.
Correct.
But as you say, if you're falling out of touch with your own universe, stuff just in that basket
Correct.
Just gets completely forgotten.
Correct. And even I was fortunate enough to sit with the one financial advisor who, bless her, I have never met somebody so empathetic with an 85-year-old. She literally, for you and me, it would have been quite easy to go through that, pages and pages of documents and spreadsheets in terms of what the unit trusts and the diversification and what you're going to get and when you're going to get it. And she literally went line item by line item by line item, that my dad made sure that he understood exactly what was happening. It was, standing from the outside, it was wonderful to witness where he understood exactly what was happening.
The challenge
Still
is,
lacked the capacity to make a couple of decisions, though.
Indeed, and I think that's exactly what I was just about to say. The challenge is, even with all of that information, it still leaves him incapacitated.
Correct.
He still has no idea.
So much information.
And there are so many different pockets of financial pay points that it's just very difficult to get a full context for what they have. And then you discover that there were some shares there, but in order to convert those shares to cash, there's this whole process that you have to go through. And so, yes, I get that for the three of you, for your mom, your dad, and yourself, things must have been exhausting by the end of it. They were probably happy to see you go.
Well,
and I know that you were very relieved to get some comedic relief, by going to some friends. What did this trip teach you about responsibility now that you are the adult in the room, as we've said?
The one thing that I realized, having sat down with my dad and talking to him, was that he was actually very responsible. He actually did more than what I've done in terms of his financial future. He actually put money away. He had investments and he diligently paid into those investments, more so than what I've done. The problem is inflation has kicked his ass to the curb. He didn't keep up with the cost of living from when he was working in his 50s to where he is now in his 80s.
And that's where having a relationship with a financial advisor potentially mitigates some of that.
Vital. So that you actually hedge yourself against inflation. And you change and you diversify and you find other ways to beat that inflation. So he has a very short runway, which is his biggest fear. His worry, my dad's worry at 85, is about running out of money.
Yeah, of course. And it's not only a worry for them, it's a worry for you and your brother.
And my wife.
Well, absolutely.
And yes, there is a bit of a runway there, but it's a very frugal runway. Yeah. But he did the work. Bridge, I can't fault him.
No, sure.
It's not like he just sat back and said, there's nothing.
Yeah. So back to the question, what does this trip teach you about responsibility?
I'm still processing that, because I think it's about taking massive action with your own life and responsibility for it, because you don't think about the future.
Okay, so are you feeling a bit overwhelmed? Because ever since you've been back, there's a sense that I can't quite get my finger on. I know you're happy to be back.
Very.
And this is your home. But there's definitely something going on that we haven't quite been able to identify or tap into or resolve. It's like this little pressure point. I know this sounds revolting, but it's like a pimple. It needs to be lanced or squeezed. I don't know how to do it because I'm not quite sure what's sitting there. But just listening to you now, I'm feeling that there might be a bit of overwhelm. Because what you've said two things. Your dad was very responsible, and your dad has done more than you've done. So is that a worry for you? That you haven't done it? That you haven't done?
It is a bit of a concern.
And is that what's causing you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, Bridge.
Right.
I sitting here and, as you've rightly said, it's been over a week, and I'm feeling a little bit numb.
Okay.
So I am giving myself the gift of time.
Okay. So let's stick with the analytical stuff, because that's easier to digest. Was there a moment where you surprised yourself in terms of how you responded or how you didn't? So being the dramatic character that you are.
I'm going to, and the listeners out there, just bear with me for a second. I'm going to give thanks to you in this regard. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your arse here.
Well, I quite like that, but anyway.
Well, okay, that's a different conversation.
Not one for this podcast.
No, not one for this podcast. But I truly did not speak back when I had the opportunity to. I sat and I just listened. I was just there. And I took a leaf out of your book when you listened to Miss 14, and didn't have to answer, didn't have to guide or advise or anything like that. And that was probably the biggest thing that I can take away from what you asked me, is just to be there, because there were some incredibly difficult conversations to have about death, how they wanted to be
cremated or buried.
correct.
What song they wanted played.
What do you want to happen? How do you see it?
Yeah.
And you don't think about that.
And I guess your dad's quite practical, and he's like, well, I'm dead. Just burn me and move on. But,
yes.
but your mom...
Well, my dad...
Your mom
my dad,
wanted a different journey.
When we entered the conversation, he's like, yeah, just, I'm dead. And cremate me and that's it. But there was a pause. And then he said, it would be really nice if you and Grant were there. I mean, that's like... For my dad to say that, he'd actually given it some thought. Some thoughts.
So it was
that
more
was
than
massive for me. I had to hold back.
Yeah, of course.
You've got to understand, for him to be able to say that.
No, I hear you, because I know him.
And recognize that he was going to be dead. And then say, it would be really nice if you and your brother were there.
Yeah, I hear you. So back to the question, in terms of how you surprised yourself, it was, if I hear you, it was your ability to just hear them and listen to them and not react.
Correct.
Yeah.
So not react, and also just keep on task.
Okay. Was there any time when you thought to yourself, I didn't know I'd have to do this shit?
Yeah, when I landed in South Africa. I think, just listening to you ask that question, I remember when I was a teenager, maybe. I remember being at my uncle's house, my dad's brother, and them having a conversation with my then grandmom. I didn't know what the details were, but I knew it was quite a serious conversation. And I remember it being about, what do you want to do in the end?
Oh, yeah?
And sitting with my folks subsequently last month, I was reminded of that memory.
Oh, okay.
And going, it's my turn now. What does that look like, and how does that unfold? So yeah, and it was a special time. I learned more about my mom and dad in the week and a half that I was with them than I have in my entire 50 years, because we spoke about... Also,
the roles were reversed. There was a vulnerability, and you spoke about death, which is not something that you have a Sunday conversation with.
No, and the emotions were high and low. I mean, I was shouted at, I was screamed at, I was told to walk out of the room.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
And I get it. Now I get it. At the time it was volatile because, it's confronting. And I did it as...
Well, you haven't alluded to any of that confrontation. No. So it sounded like it was all very calm and all very placid and everybody behaved.
It was all calm and no.
But I take it that it's, yes. And when things are this emotive, then it's impossible.
I recognise that was the responsibility of being an adult.
Yeah. Did you feel like a good son?
I wish I could have done more. I feel like I could have done more.
When you were there, or just in general in your life?
Yeah. When I was there.
Okay.
When I was there, I wish I could do more in my life. I wish I was financially independent or stable enough that I could send money home every month. I wish I could. More. So I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to use the word, but you know what?
Guilt.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's unfair. That's unfair on you. It's unfair on me, because it is what it is. This is the situation that has presented itself.
Yeah.
But they're my folks.
Yeah, of course.
They're blood.
Yeah, of course. What does it even mean now in midlife to be a good son, actually?
I think the question you're asking me...
a good child.
...is, I don't know who said it, I wish I did know, but you become an adult when both your parents die. And up until that point, you're always...
A child,
yes. A child. Yeah. You're a daughter or a son.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened to me yet, and I know that journey is imminent. Yeah. So what does it mean to be a good son? To to live the best that I possibly can and be the best that I can be for you and for Miss 14 and for myself first. Because if I can look after myself and take care of myself and be the best version of myself, the rest will follow.
I think we've covered this a little bit, but this really falls under the section of navigating the sandwich generation. So how has this experience shifted your perspective on aging, care of aging, and financials? So I know we've already said that as far as the financial thing is concerned, you're feeling a little bit of overwhelm at the moment, feeling like you haven't done enough for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that is leading to you being a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights.
Correct.
You're not moving forward or back.
Correct. In limbo, yeah. It's a cuck place to be. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this situation, but I have to honor the feeling that's going through because I know that the pimple will be popped.
You don't want to be in this situation.
No, I don't. I don't want to feel useless. I don't want to feel like I can't contribute and look after my own self, in the years to come. But I've got to be gracious with myself that I went through, or I've got to be self-aware enough to know what I went through. And to give myself a little bit of space and time and not just chuck myself back into the grindstone because I fear that it'll be the opposite end of the spectrum. So that limbo is a necessary part of me be able to move forward.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you are helping me just hold the space for that.
Yeah.
You will get to a point of the time where you'll kick me up my ass. I know that. But up until then, I'm not waiting for that.
I hope not.
No, I'm not waiting for that. But I definitely am still acclimatizing back into my own body and back into New Zealand.
Yeah. I think that we expect quite a lot of our bones and blood and spirit and mind.
Too much so.
Yeah, because you don't go into a territory and slay all these dragons and then come back and carry on leading a life that you lived before. You're ultimately changed by all of those experiences, and some of the dragons that you slayed were fire breathers, and so there's a little bit of healing that needs to take place. And I don't need that. I don't intend that to sound dramatic or whatever, but I do think that there's a time of adaptation, and I think what's happening is you're kind of preparing yourself.
I'm not the same person I was when I left.
Definitely
obviously.
not. No, definitely not.
And I think that realization is what I'm trying to get to grips with.
Yeah. I hear you.
There's a whole recalibration of who I am. There's a whole reassessment of what the hell am I actually doing?
And it's that weight
what
of...
do I want to do?
But it's that weight of being a son and a father.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I might be running away a little bit. I have to admit that to myself. It's like I want to run away.
Yeah, I hear you. You inevitably get to the point where you've
turn around and come back.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm over this now.
I have to say that. I have to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
because I think.
Look, you're a deep feeling guy.
I am. You know what? And I'm so sick and tired of you see time and time again all this information that comes to you that you've got to flip and just face up and be a man and get on with it. So I'm trying to practice all the stuff that I'm learning and understanding. I'm trying to actually incorporate it into my own.
Okay, but you have to sometimes distill the noise.
Yes,
and think about.
I think that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, just think about, because Tony Robbins comes to mind a lot. There is so much information, but so little knowledge, and the only space and place that you get knowledge is when you listen to yourself. That's your job on planet Earth: is know yourself.
True.
Because if you know yourself, you can then you know what to do, and you know how to go, and you know where to go, and you know how to behave, and you know what your purpose is and how that changes. Just know yourself. And so just sitting quietly with what you're going through is probably the most powerful thing that you could be doing.
Yeah.
And so, to be clear, I don't expect any more or any less from you right now. Okay. Good. What's the piece of advice that you would give somebody who hasn't yet had to deal with this, but will?
Arm yourself with the knowledge that conversation is coming.
And actually that there are tools out there, because
Correct.
you refer often to the purple file.
Correct.
But you were saying, for example, in South Africa on the AVBOB site, which is the funeral policy,
there are
we
a
haven't even
number.
touched on the funeral policy actually.
No, we didn't even, but there are a number of resources available. And one of the resources...
But what is the resource? Just explain it.
So what I did was, because the conversation about death and dying and how you would like that to play out is a difficult one to have, and there's stuff that you might miss out. So the purple file that I came across was literally a checklist for checking out.
So that's, do you have a Facebook account? Do you have a bank account? Do you have insurances?
There's sections to it. So there's an obvious section about your personal details. There's an obvious section about all your accounts.
Yeah.
There's a section about all your passwords.
Yeah.
And it's simple things like, when you die, how do I open your phone?
That's so
What's
true.
your PIN code for your phone?
What's your PIN code for your computer?
What's your PIN code for your computer?
Yeah, exactly.
What's your ATM PIN code? Who do I contact?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's their name? What's their telephone number?
Yeah.
You know, it might seem very obvious talking about it now, but in the moment, suddenly you need to contact someone and you don't have their contact, and you pick up the phone and you can't get into the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's about having those conversations. So that checklist is literally just an information portal into what happens post-death. Yeah. And I've been through it a number of times now with my folks. My dear dad, I love him to bits, filled it out in pencil first because that's how he operates. And I went through it with him until he filled it up in pen. And I love him for that. That's fine. And there was some stuff that, we had to redo, and et cetera, et cetera. It was beautiful.
But if you think about a life lived, there are a lot of things. I mean, do you give money to a charity? Is there a charity that you should
It's
have,
one of the
have to
questions.
get
What
hold
happens
of?
to your pets?
Yeah.
What do you want to happen to your pets?
Oh,
Who looks after your pets?
Yeah. Yeah.
Your local church, your local charity, as you rightly said.
Yeah.
Do you want all your friends at your funeral? Are there people that you don't want? Are there letters that you want to
Are there
give?
people that you don't want?
It actually
Is there
asks.
a childhood grudge?
Are there is there something that you need to say to someone before you die? When you are incapable of walking, or whatever the case is, do you need someone at your aid? Do you want a doula? Do you want a priest? What religion are you? Is there something that we haven't spoken about that you want to speak about? So all these different conversations suddenly start popping up, but you can have them in a time and place that is conducive to a resolution to those questions. It's all there,
and I guess
the person is compass mentis, and they
And I guess this purple file or whatever the folder is, and as you say, the resources everywhere, is a guardrail.
It's a guardrail.
And so you're both
correct.
Operating within this guardrail and answering these questions. So before it gets too heavy and deep.
And you can take a break.
Yeah.
And you can step away, go and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Go for a walk around the block.
Yeah.
But you revisit it and you get it done because you love your parents and you want the best for them, and you want to be the best version of yourself because that's how they raised you. So as difficult as it is, and if I look back now, yes, it was difficult in the moment. But I'm so proud of myself for having completed it with them.
But that's an interesting point that you raise. You said you want to be the best version of yourself because that's how your parents raised you. So I wonder if we ever think about that. If we think about what we look like through our parents' eyes, and are we being the best versions of ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's a question perhaps for
another podcast, because rightly so, some people don't talk to their parents. When we're being very specific about the relationship that we've got, with our parents. So yeah.
Are we the best versions of ourselves?
Are we the best versions?
Will Miss 14 ponder that question at some point in her life?
Sure. Miss 14 went through a lot going, being there. I'm glad she was there.
She turned into a little African, which I love.
Lekker brew.
Awesome.
Lekker dofne.
That's so cute.
She was beautiful. Oh, yeah. She was incredible.
Filthy feet. And
I think sometimes I held her back a little bit because I'm a parent,
No, because you're overprotective.
Yeah, she's my only one.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so to sum up the piece of advice, let's just sum that up and put a circle around that.
Is have the conversation sooner rather than later.
Okay.
That would be my advice.
And that conversation includes handling whatever this purple folder is in whatever manner or form you can find it, understanding what the financial circumstances.
Just like you said in your
of the
previous
parent.
podcast, that you have a beginning of life doula or a midwife, and you prep before you have a child. There's a lot of prep that goes before having a child. You need to prep before your death. You need to understand that you've lived a life, whether that's a good life, a bad life, a rich life, a poor life, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you have to prep for your death.
I wonder why we don't. I wonder what that says about us as a civilization.
Because I think
we're so hooked on feeling good and making ourselves feel better all the time that we can't handle the pain, really.
My take on it is that it's a cultural thing, because in some cultures it's spoken about and it's dealt with. You go through the seasons of life, the spring, summer, autumn, winter. Where I think in a lot of cultures it's not spoken about because we have no culture. So it's just assumed that it would take care, and you kind of bumble along as we do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that anymore. I'm choosing a different path. Hence putting things in place. Yes, I'm 50. And it's never too late to actually have these conversations, to do something about it. That's the beauty of it.
If this little trip had a title, like a chapter in your book, in your story, what would it be called?
2 homes.
2 homes. Okay. Yes, because that was a big thing for you. You've allowed your heart to accept the notion that you have both a home in Africa and a home here in New Zealand. Which is actually quite a deep thought when you think about, do you have a home that you can always go to?
So when we immigrated, and we've mentioned this in the podcast before, there was always only plan A. I said to you, there was plan A. We were coming over, there was no plan B or C. When that happened, I put all the Africanness, the thoughts, the feelings, the sights and sounds into a vault, closed that vault, and locked the vault. I didn't take the key out the vault, I just locked it, because I knew that there was a journey that I had to go on. Now, having come back and having spent a month in South Africa and spent time with my folks and with some very dear friends, and going to the Midlands and going to a music festival with Miss 14, that key unlocked the vault and the door opened, and some of those memories and those feelings and those Africa vibes came out. And I made peace with the fact that I have a home that I've built and love in New Zealand with you and Miss 14. But even more so, that it was okay to acknowledge my country of birth, South Africa.
Also, that's where your best mates are.
They're my best mates.
Your
but
tribe.
The soil, the air, just the vibe. That is, Africa is a vibe.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay? Africa is a vibe for me. And the acknowledgement that I can actually give myself permission to go, hey, it's okay to have 2 homes.
Yeah.
And to even admit that to you.
Yeah.
That I've got 2 homes. Africa is in my heart.
Yeah.
But New Zealand is my home.
Yeah, very much.
I'll give you a perfect example of what happened when we were visiting some of our friends. As it always does, it lands up on sport. And very dear friends that we stayed with in the Midlands have got 3 kids, and their eldest son said to me, right, South Africa play New Zealand. What happens? And I took a moment and I said, rugby wins.
Oh my God,
and nothing else happened. Because
you're such a sage.
I can't,
oh my God, rugby wins. Well,
but I can't make a decision.
I love that.
I can't make a decision, you know what I mean?
I think if there's more Kiwis in the room, I'd be, go New Zealand. If there's more South Africans in the room, I'd be, go South Africa.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, it depends on
it depends who the biggest oak in the room is.
We could be steering a big pot.
Exactly.
My point being that, yes, he wanted to know which side of the fence I was. And I just said rugby wins.
Rugby wins.
It's very difficult sometimes to watch those 2 teams play.
Yeah.
And then go,
Yeah.
So that's when I realized it's okay to have 2.
Perfect. Okay. I think on that note, I'm quite keen to wrap this up. Just in terms of summary, prepare yourself for your parents' death, because that's coming and it's an inevitable thing. And don't be afraid of what needs to be done to prepare for that.
You know what? Be afraid. Feel those feelings. Be afraid
and do it anyway.
And do it anyway. You know, get scared. Just flipping. I don't know how else to say it, but it's going to have to happen at some stage.
And
I would advise ourselves even to have these conversations with Miss 14, even now.
Yeah, I suppose.
So that it doesn't become this taboo subject.
Yeah.
That it's like, I am going to die. And I'm not trying to make it morbid. It's just a reality. We're all walking each other home, as Ram Dass rightly says. It's a fact. And the conversation that we need to have as well about your death or my death, and contemplate that and what that looks like. I'm not saying every day and be morbid about it, but it's a fact.
Yeah, exactly.
Is to normalize it.
Yeah.
Is to normalize these conversations where you can have a conversation with someone that it doesn't become this big thing at the end of your life, which it shouldn't be. It should be a celebration of your life, if anything. Because the only people that actually are upset are the people that get left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Those are the ones who are going to emote about you having passed. So yeah, that would be my summation of this. And I'm not an expert. I'm going through this. I'm treading the path, and I'll update as and when we need it. So, and thank you for the questions, and to the folks out there, if there's anything specific that you want to know, get in contact. If there's a subject that you want to talk about, or
that's why we visited this one again, because we've had such amazing feedback.
And thank you for that.
And people that have popped up out of the blue.
Yeah.
And just shared some of their experiences with us.
No, it's been amazing. I must just share this with you. We were at Splashy Fen 2025, which is a music festival in Underberg.
It's now been voted, you said,
it's one of the best festivals,
family festivals in the world.
South Africa, yeah, or the world in South Africa.
Oh, right.
So to be corrected on that. Yeah. But I was walking just through the market and into the music tent, and somebody popped up and said, "Hey, you're that guy from Bolton Ink Effect podcast." Awesome. And I was like, I'm in Africa. I didn't know him, but he found me and listened to it and recognized me.
Fantastic.
So the power of affecting one is worth doing these podcasts.
It's worth doing this, yeah.
So onwards and upwards. And thank you very much for your looking after the fort. I missed you. I missed you a lot.
I missed you too.
You missed me.
I did. There was that one day.
Thanks, Bridge.
Thanks, Louis.
Can I ask you a question?
The Bolton Ink Effect.